Hello, I'm Chris Beachum, managing editor of Gold Derby, here with Mikey Day, cast member on Saturday Night Live. Mikey, you just finished up season 49 a couple of weeks ago. What's
We
it? You've
did.
done several seasons now. What's it like on that final week of a season? Is it almost like getting out of school?
I was about to say it's kind of last week of school vibes for sure because the summer's coming and you're just kind of waiting for it. But finale week's always a fun week. There's a fun energy. There's also kind of an excitement and a renewed energy sort of on the finale week. It's also it's I just feel like everyone's kind of it's like the last day of school, basically. And there's just a lot of fun stuff and kind of celebrating each other. And because it's a grind, like the end of a 3 week run, you're pretty tired. I know it seems like, whoa, it's only 3 weeks, but those weeks can get pretty long with the schedule. So
I think there
yeah.
were a couple of times in your tenure there that, especially over in the fall during a presidential election, where it's been like 4 episodes or 5 episodes in a row.
Yeah, I remember my first season on the cast, season 42, I believe. Yeah, we had like four in a row, I remember. Just going straight through. So yeah, election years can get pretty crazy. I'm not sure next season what if we have any marathon stretches in there, but if you know they're coming, you just kind of mentally prepare for it and then you just kind of push through. But by the fourth week in a row, you're like, all right, what ideas do I have that I haven't yet spent? So
Does a
it all
presidential
depends.
election year feel different among the writers and the cast and everybody?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a concentration on, especially if there's the debates. This year, I think they're doing one in the summer and then one in September, maybe. I don't know. This upcoming election feels very different. It feels unlike a normal election. Like the primaries felt weird. Normally they just kind of feel more, I don't know, there's more debates and such. And just with Trump and everything, it's felt very different. So we'll see how this one feels. But I remember, I mean, I've been there through a few now, and there's definitely a different energy, especially in the country too. It just kind of everyone's kind of everything just feels kind of heightened. And I know there's definitely a lot more focus on the show in terms of handling the debates and all the machinations of the election and whatever comes up. But it all it all depends. I remember my first season on the cast, I was going to play Tim Kaine, Clinton's VP running mate, and then Beck Bennett was going to play Pence. And the debate was fine, nothing really crazy happened. I remember talking to Sarah Schneider and Chris Kelly, and they were talking about the cold open, and this was like, I don't know, Thursday night, Friday early, and they were like, yeah, we'll see what happens. We're trying to craft something with this debate. And then I think offhand, Chris might have said something like, unless Trump does something crazy, and then the Access Hollywood debacle unfolded like that day. So that was a very unusual election cycle, but we'll see what this one brings. I
We
don't
were
know.
there. One of my Marcus, who you met last week on the other panel, he and I were in
Uh-huh.
New York in 16 in the fall, and we got to one of the episode we saw live was started out with a presidential debate with Trump, the one where Trump's roaming around so much.
Oh, like
Yeah,
crossing back
right,
behind Hillary.
right.
And they play like the Jaws theme. That one was so fun.
That was
I think,
so much fun.
yeah.
We'd never seen it live before, so it was after what would that
Oh,
have been,
yeah.
42 years, watching the show, coming and watching it live
Oh,
was
wow.
yeah, I'm sure you've had friends and family that sit in the audience.
Yeah.
What kind of feedback do you get from them?
I know they always comment on the crew in during the commercial breaks, how they miraculously set up for the next sketch or move into music and how the sets move. Because they use a lot of the cameras are really big and they use this massive crane that's like attached to a car, basically. I don't know. There's like 6 fully grown men operating this thing in addition to the cameraman operating in the little seat attached to the crane. But that thing is enormous and doesn't have the best turning radius. So watching that thing maneuver through 8H during a show, during commercial breaks, is astounding. I've almost been run over by it countless times. But it moves pretty slow, but it's like when it's coming, you're just like, get out of the way. But and then they always comment on Donna, who's the host's dresser, who after a sketch grabs the host and just runs them to a changing booth to get changed and ready for the next sketch with the intensity. It's as if the host is the president and Donna's Secret Service and she heard a gunshot, just whisking them away hurriedly. But it's pretty remarkable to watch. I mean, she has to rush the host because they're in every sketch and sometimes they only have a minute and a half or whatever to make the change. But there's definitely a show within the show going on for sure.
Well, and for the host, they're not used to it like you are, for most hosts.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes they're like, what's happening? Especially, too, it's crazy when someone does musical, is the musical guest and the host, like Dua Lipa most recently comes to mind. Just they have, except for update, and sometimes they'll go on update, but they do not have much time to kind of catch their breath and get their bearings.
Speaking of presidents, one of my
So it's
favorite
pretty.
highlights of yours this year was the State of the Union address that you as Joe Biden.
Oh, that was fun. That was when the State of the Union is when I felt I kind of hooked into kind of portraying Biden was because he had this energy, but he's still because he's obviously an older gentleman. But with the State of the Union, he kind of had this renewed energy. Kind of felt like old school Biden a little bit. So I was like, okay, so it's like Grandpa had a Red Bull. So there's energy. There's this base layer of an aged man, but he had a Red Bull, so he's kind of like fired up, which that one was a lot of fun. And then Scarlett came in that week and just crushed it. I told her after, I was like, that was amazing because it was after rehearsal and she had never like done it. I'm sure she had looked over the script, but she just came in and did such a good job. Was very impressed.
Yeah, that was another highlight of the year for sure. Um, Speaking of
Yeah.
host, I've always wondered this. I don't think I've talked to lots of SNL people, but I don't think I've ever asked this question. How do you, as a cast member,
Uh-oh.
find out who is going to be hosting an episode later or two later or whenever you find out? And what kind of reactions do you have? Do you start thinking of ideas immediately, or what's going on
Oh,
in your
right.
mind?
Yeah. Sometimes you'll hear from someone in the talent department or a producer or something that they've been, and we go in on Monday for pitch. We all go into Lauren's office. Many people sit on the floor and you pitch the host an idea, just kind of a get to know you start of the week type meeting. But there's a big board in Lauren's office with the index cards on it with all of the show dates. And sometimes down the line, you'll look and you'll see cards up there. Sometimes they're definitely in place, and sometimes it's tentative, but you'll see some of the hosts. So oftentimes on Mondays will be the first time I've seen a name or heard about an upcoming host. And then you kind of have them in mind later. Like you'll have an idea and you're like, oh, that might be better for whoever. So it all depends. Sometimes you'll hear about it a few weeks, sometimes, less.
In all your time on the show, do you recall somebody that you just were really excited? You saw their name and you said, "Oh, that's going to be great."
Wow, I mean, there's always I feel like I'm always excited because even if I'm not as familiar with a host, it's I've obviously like heard of the person and it's cool to get to know them and meet them. I mean, I remember seeing Adam Sandler's name up there and being very excited, and Eddie Murphy, kind of the icons of SNL are always very exciting. I mean, it's always fun to see a host name up there. Obviously, seeing Ryan Gosling's name up there is always a treat. And this season, we knew his name was up there for when he hosted, which I believe was April, but his name had been on an index card up there since I want to say the fall, like late fall. So we knew he was coming for a while. So that's always fun.
I do love it when a previous cast member comes back, or
Oh yeah, it's
one of those
always
people
the
that has
best.
hosted a lot of times. Those are
Yeah.
my favorites, I think.
Yeah, because it's like they know what it is. They're usually down for something silly and to be crazy. So it's always fun. Sometimes it's overwhelming too. Like when Kristen Wiig hosts, it's like, well, she can do anything. So there are no limits. So it's almost overwhelming at times because she can do so much. You're like, you can put her anywhere and it'll be funny. So but it's always fun when old cast members host. I know we had Kristen and Maya towards the end of the season, like very close to each other in terms of when they came back, and they're so good. So they do a lot of the work for you.
I was going to ask about Maya. You're in this sketch that might have been one of my two or three favorites of the year, which was the Hot Ones.
Yes,
You're the
love
host of
it.
that show. Tell
I
me
love it.
your thoughts on that particular sketch.
Yes, I wrote that with Streeter Seidel, and we did the first one a few seasons ago. And it was just kind of a perfect storm because Maya had done Beyonce in the past, and her impression is so funny. Just the way she composes herself, and she's just so put together and iconic at all times. So and we had just seen a Hot Ones video recently. I know Hot Ones had been around for a while, but we had seen a one of the episodes close to that when Maya came to SNL. So we just thought Beyonce on Hot Ones is a perfect fit. So, and then ever since that first time Maya came, we were like, if you come back, we got to do Beyonce on Hot Ones again. And for Maya also does a terrific Oprah Winfrey. So for a while we were playing with the idea of like maybe Oprah goes on Hot Ones because we always just like the idea that it's someone just so poised and who you never really see kind of break down and lose their cool. But we opted to go with Beyonce again because Beyonce is just kind of, even when she's not freaking out over Hot Ones, her Maya's impression is so fun of just her just talking about normal stuff is fun. Like, it's a pleasure for you to have me, stuff like that.
When she said, I'm about to do something that shouldn't be done on television," or
Yeah, and
some-
it blurs.
right, right,
You just hear a sound effect.
right.
It's true. I mean, Beyonce is the type of person that you can't imagine her burping or doing human stuff. So it's
Right.
fun
Well, she's
to
not
kind of
human at all. Um,
yeah, she's
in the
otherworldly.
best possible sense of that term.
Oh,
I could
she's
ask you about
perfection.
so many. I pulled up so many clips. I do watch every week. I've been watching since I was a little
Fantastic.
kid, and 50th season coming
Fantastic.
up next year, which I want to ask
I
you about
know.
at the end here. But
It's
uh,
wild.
I've gone back recently and watched the whole first season on Peacock,
Oh,
and
wow.
the level of greatness to average to above average is about the same it's been every year for 50 years.
Yeah.
Um, you
Yeah,
know,
you'll like watch old episodes and I mean, you always remember like when you used to watch, like I remember when I was in high school and you just remember the stuff you liked and you kind of look back as whoever you were like, oh, that was my cast. But you'll watch just like a typical episode from that era, and there's some good stuff and okay stuff. Like you said, it's very much kind of always hit or miss, but you
Who
kind
was
of
your cast? Who was the
the hit.
cast you watched growing up?
I mean, when I first discovered the show, I was like a kid, and it was like I think I had seen Coneheads on like Nick at Night and some of the old school like first original cast, but I really started like paying attention to the show and fully realizing like what it was with like Mike Myers and Dana Carvey and that crew. Because like Wayne's World was a big deal for me when it came out. Like I was more familiar with the movie because the movie was such a phenomenon, and I was in grade school at the time. So it was like the perfect age for Wayne's World, like walking around quoting it, saying swing and everything. So, and then they would re-air episodes on Comedy Central that were only an hour. And I remember I would watch those and tape those. And that's where I really saw a lot of them because I didn't stay up on past 11 that much. I tried to, but to see the show live. So I saw a lot of the reruns. And then when I was in high school, it was like Will Ferrell and Sherry O'Terry and that crew.
Well, I want to give you the biggest compliment I can possibly give you. I think you're in the category
Wow.
of, speaking of the cast you just mentioned, Phil Hartman
Oh
and
my God. One
Dan
of the
Aykroyd from
greats.
the original, in that I think you're a utility player who can come into any sketch and make it better. And you could play the father, you could play the grandfather, you could play the kid, you could play the
Right.
boss, you could play basically anything. And I think of Dan Aykroyd and Phil Hartman as being those types of people too.
Those are amazing comparisons. Thank you. You made me feel really good. You made me feel really good saying that I could play the kid. That made my day
You could
as I
play the
get
kid.
older by the day.
You've
Yeah,
been in
get a
sketches
wig
this
in
year where you
there,
were
get
like on a
some
high school
bangs.
team or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Usually I'll be like, I don't know. Should I write myself? Feel like college can get away with. But yeah, I truly appreciate it. I mean, obviously Phil Hartman, Dan Aykroyd, I mean, legends at that show and beyond. So that is an incredible comparison. I truly appreciate that. But it is fun, just like you said, the utility roles. Sometimes you'll get cast as something and you'll be like, oh, this is great. I didn't write this for myself, and this is such a fun character. Like Dan Bulla, Stephen Castillo, and Jimmy Fallon wrote this old home movies one with when Dakota Johnson hosted, where a family was looking back at old home movies, and the parents they showed had been on an episode of like a Jerry Springer type show. So
Yeah, I
Dakota
remember
and
that.
I
Yeah.
played ourselves back in the day in the 90s version of young version of ourselves in that environment, the type of people that would go on one of those Jerry Springer type shows, which was so much fun to do. Dakota was so funny in that too. She was awesome.
Well, people are wondering why I haven't brought up the Beavis sketch or Washington's Dream or Scooby-Doo. Watch our chat with Mikey and some of the creative craftspeople on SNL. That's going to debut on
the
June 8th.
heroes, the
And
heroes of the
so
show.
you discussed those extensively there. So I didn't want
Right.
to make you have to go through those again as well today.
People are
But
like,
I
he's
do.
talking about Beavis and Butthead again.
Well, it was a seminal moment, I think, not only for SNL, but for your career. I mean,
Oh my
people were
God, it was
talking
the
about that
best.
and still are weeks later.
I know it's crazy how like one sketch can really come when it kind of hits and resonates with people. It's crazy, especially when you're sitting next to Ryan Gosling.
Well, both of your reactions, and then, of course, Heidi's reactions. Um, Last question or last subject.
Of course.
You're on
Well,
the ballot for the Emmys in supporting actor for SNL, but you're also on the ballot for reality
yes.
host for Is It Cake? What's your
Ooh,
favorite
that's
thing about doing
exciting.
that show?
I mean, I was so unfamiliar with the baking world before that show. and just being exposed to that community. I mean, it's insane artistry what they do every week or every episode, rather, and what they're making. I was vaguely aware of the hyper realistic cake community, but obviously, having done this show, I've been thrust into it, and I've learned so much and just gained such an admiration for these bakers and what they do. It's almost like a magic trick. That's why I think kids respond to the show so well. It's like watching magicians kind of deceive and create deceptions. But I mean, it's the people I've met, all the bakers have been absolutely lovely. And it's just such a fun show. There's a fun energy and a positivity, even though there's eliminations and, people are sent home. There's just kind of a fun kindness and just a positive, good spirit to the show that I enjoy, that I try to help foster. And it's so much fun. And it's, at its core, and the producers are very aware of this, it's just silly. It's like the show's called Is It Cake? We're not, it's not, doesn't take itself too seriously and not too self-important. So I like the silly spirit of it. I mean, we do some crazy stuff on there. I'm like smashing toilets made out of cake with a sledgehammer. I don't know if that'll necessarily lead to a nomination, me talking about slamming a toilet with a sledgehammer, but I don't know. There's just a real fun energy to the show. And so many kids love it. Usually, whenever I'm out, I'll see a kid and they'll kind of be looking and I'll go, ooh, I know that look. They watch Is It Cake. And it's just fun seeing them be like, on the episode where they made a suitcase and just like the things they want to know and stuff. It's very fun. It's
Well, it's a
very
great show. And see, you
interesting to
can play a
have
kid.
fans.
You did the kid's voice just now.
Yeah, thank you. Can play kids.
Bring it
I
full
love it.
circle. Bring it full circle. Well,
This is my
Mikey, I hope
favorite
you have a
interview.
great summer vacation.
Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully this was interesting. Sometimes when I'm
Absolutely.
hearing myself talk, I'm like, what am I saying?
No, it's been
What's
great.
this
Thank you so
clown
much.
saying? Thank you so much.